Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do have some big polling news to get to here today. We've got a New Hampshire poll. This came out last night. Donald Trump up by zero point 0.4. And New Hampshire, believe it or not, could be big depending on what happens with the Rust Belt. If Harris sweeps the Rust Belt, which is what they're hoping for, and all of the swing states like the Sun Belt goes to Trump, Harris would win with 270 if she keeps New Hampshire. But if Trump flipped New Hampshire, he could lose the entire Rust Belt and win. There's also been reports Donald Trump visiting New Mexico. He's going to Albuquerque for a rally, and he's also going to Virginia this coming Saturday. So there's a few different things to take away when it comes to these trips. You could argue, well, he loves his position currently in the Rust Belt. Their internal numbers say they're up by 3 or 4, so he's going to these other states to try and expand the map. In the event that his numbers are wrong and maybe he loses the Rust Belt, it may not matter if he can sweep the Sun Belt and then also take a New Hampshire, take a Virginia, or take a New Mexico. Or you could be looking at this and saying, well, maybe his campaign is thinking we've been to the Rust Belt so many times, going there again is going to make a big difference. We know the Rust Belt's going to be very close. Let's try and expand the map and give ourselves a chance in case of a bad scenario where we lose the entire Rust Belt or something happens. I mean, I don't think they're going to lose the Sun Belt really at all, any of those states, when you look at it. But you can see the New Hampshire poll. We've got the reports he's going to New Mexico. We've got the reports he's going to Virginia. We're hearing there's a potential Virginia poll that has Trump up. We'll see if that gets released, maybe by Emerson. I don't know. It was a rumor. Somebody told me it. But that would really signal that Virginia is a swing state. And we would see serious betting money go on to Trump to win Virginia. And he'd probably go up to around 35, 40% in terms of that. But if we take a look at the current overall map, right now, I'm just going to do some different scenarios based off of Trump potentially expanding his map and see how we can get Trump over 270 depending on what happens. Now, in this first one, I'm just going to say, well, obviously you can see New Mexico. I have it in blue. I do think right now New Mexico will be blue, but obviously if Trump is visiting New Mexico in the final week of the campaign, their internal numbers think it's flippable. Maybe they think they're down by 3, they're down by 4. They think it's potentially flippable. I do think it's going to be a relatively close state. Whether or not Trump can close on it and actually flip it, we will have to see. There's just not a lot of polling out of New Mexico at this point. So in this scenario, I'm going to give Harris, New Mexico. I'm also going to give Harris, Minnesota. I don't think there's any right now rumors that Trump's going to be visiting Minnesota. I know a lot of people think Minnesota might even be more probable than Virginia to flip. Right now, they're very, very close. I think probably with the Youngkin factor, Virginia would be easier. But let's just say, for example, Harris also holds Virginia in this scenario. So you've got her at 222 at this point. But let's give Trump the entire Sun Belt because right now things are looking great in Nevada. They're looking even better in Arizona. They're looking amazing in Georgia. I did a video yesterday talking about Arizona and Georgia. They're not locks, but they're almost to like 80% for Trump. The polls are amazing there. And then also North Carolina is around 75 right now for Trump in terms of percent chance. So you've got Trump sweeping the Sun Belt at that point. He's up to 268. This would be the problem for Trump, right? It would be Harris taking the entire Rust Belt, which I'm guessing is their current strategy because of the recent polls that have come out of Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina. The Democrats lost in 2020 and 2016 against Trump. It's unlikely they're going to win it based off of all of the indicators here in 2024. They're going to try to flip, I'm sure. Or they're going to try and flip it, I'm sure. But at this point, this is what they really want. And then it potentially comes down to New Hampshire, right? Because we saw that poll that had Trump up by 0.4. There's a lot of independent people in New Hampshire. I don't think it's necessarily likely that Trump will win New Hampshire, but in this scenario, this is why New Hampshire is very important. If you take New Hampshire by half a point, you win the election while losing the entire Rust Belt. Let's say, for the sake of argument, she ends up taking New Hampshire, she takes all of the Rust Belt, but Trump takes Virginia. You win there if you're Trump, while you lose the entire Rust Belt. I don't think Trump's losing the Rust Belt. I'm just saying when you expand your map, you give yourself more options to where even if you lose the Rust Belt, because those states are very, very close in terms of the polling, Pennsylvania, you could argue maybe Trump's up by 2.5 at this point, but really they're all very, very close. I think right now Trump's at around 60% chance to win Pennsylvania based on the poly market data and the betting there. But that's another thing you could do. Now, let's just say for the sake of the argument, Harris wins that. That gets her back up to 270. If Trump's able to take New Mexico, you end up winning, right? You take New Mexico and Virginia, you easily win with 286. So there's a lot of different options here, and it's looking like the next states on the list for Trump outside of the Big Seven swing would be a New Hampshire, would be a Virginia, and would be a New Mexico based off of the polling. Based off of, we saw a poll out of Virginia on Friday that had Harris only up by 1 point, clearly within the margin. You get the poll out of New Hampshire with Trump up by half a point within the margin. It's flippable. New Mexico's a little bit different. The polling, there's just there's not been a lot of polling there. We saw a while ago there was a Trump Biden poll that had Trump up by like 1, but with Trump and Harris, there's just not a lot of polling, and the only polling that I've seen does have Harris up by 5 to 6 points at least there. So it's going to be hard, but obviously their internal numbers, if you're making an investment to where you're traveling to New Mexico this late into the cycle, I think some of this is Trump and his campaign know they've been to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin so many times. There's only so many times you can go there. Why not expand your map if in case the worst case catastrophic scenario happens to where you somehow get swept in the Rust Belt, you still have other options on the table. You've got a Virginia, you've got a New Mexico, you've got a New Hampshire, and these are states that are winnable. It's not maybe likely, maybe it's only a 20 to 25% chance, but if you make an investment there, you could really up that. And it's like, how many times are you going to visit Michigan? How many times are you going to visit Pennsylvania? You've been there so many times. It's like the impact wanes, and maybe it's a better idea to make an investment into another state. But I'm sure they're still going to be in those states, obviously. And you want to win these 3 states, and it's over. You win Pennsylvania. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, I think the election's over. Just based off of the Sun Belt and how well Trump's performing there. Like, you can give Harris everything else that she would normally get, but you win Pennsylvania, you're at 292. That's it. And there's been a ton of investment made in Pennsylvania for Republicans, and they barely lost it in 2020. And the voter registration's been so great. Pennsylvania will seal it just based off of how I think Trump's going to do in Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. And then obviously also Nevada. But you didn't even need Nevada in this case. You could give Harris Nevada in that case by half a point, and Trump would still easily win with 281. That would be with Harris winning Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, holding on to New Mexico, holding on to Virginia, holding on to New Hampshire. She still loses because Trump takes Pennsylvania. That's why Pennsylvania is so important in that scenario. At that point, technically, I think, yeah, you could also lose Arizona, but I would be shocked at this point, this late in the cycle, if Trump lost Arizona based off the trends and how everything is going in that state. But this is just depicting why it's important, Trump expanding his map, making it so you take a Virginia, you take a New Hampshire, you take a New Mexico. It makes it so much easier with how well Trump is performing in an Arizona, in a Georgia, in a North Carolina at this point. Nevada's been great with the early voting. You're looking at those states almost, really trending to Trump. And then it's like, you just need a Pennsylvania at that point. You just need one of the Rust Belt states. It doesn't even matter, but Pennsylvania is probably the most right wing out of the 3 Rust Belts, but they are very close. I mean, who knows? Maybe this cycle, Wisconsin will be the most right wing in terms of how they vote. But by the way, those Senate races are very, very close as well in the Rust Belt. So there's going to be a lot of key things decided this cycle when it comes to that state. But just looking at this poll, you don't want to put too much into it, but it is interesting to see Trump up this late in the cycle. It looks like that's New Hampshire Journal, their poll done over 3 days. You've got the TIPP, that's tied again. So when you look at the overall numbers, I think right now Trump is up by 0.1 in terms of real clear, just general popular vote. So that is also good news in terms of that. We've also got this, and this is something that happens every single cycle. Top donor contributions to Trump and Harris. You can see, look at Harris, Google, Microsoft, huh? It's all the search engines. They basically the people that control the internet donating heavily to Harris, and their employees donating to Harris. And that was the problem with Twitter as well. The people that were in charge of the bans were 99% left wing, so there's obviously going to be some significant bias when it comes to that, but that's just something Republicans have always had to deal with. Now with Musk, it is better, but it still is a big issue when it comes to the employees of these companies and who their top people are also donating to. A lot of the employees are liberal. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.